Have you ever wondered how an ancient religious tradition stays vibrant and relevant for literally thousands of years? Well, today we're diving into the unique way Judaism engages with its most sacred text, the Bible. And as you'll see, it's not treated as some static, dusty old book, but as the beginning of a living, breathing conversation that's been going on for centuries.
So let's just jump right in with a paradox that gets to the absolute heart of this whole topic. We've all heard the famous biblical phrase, an eye for an eye. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? But here's the twist. For millennia, Jewish law has explicitly forbidden taking someone's actual eye. Instead, it demands financial payment. So how on earth do you get from literal retaliation to, writing a check for damages? That's the puzzle we're going to unpack today.
I mean, look at this. On the left, you've got the plain text from the book of Exodus. Seems pretty unambiguous. But then you look to the right at the rabbinic tradition, and it's a completely different story. The rabbis argued that eye for eye doesn't mean the physical eye, but the monetary value of the eye. Now that is a radical shift, and it's a foundational move if you really want to understand Jewish thought.
And get this, it's not just a one-off. This kind of interpretive move is everywhere. The Bible lays out a death penalty for a wayward and defiant son, but the rabbis came along and created so many loopholes and conditions that, in practice, the law could never actually be carried out. Or think about the Sabbath. The text forbids work. But what does work even mean? Well, the rabbis defined it, extending the idea to things the Bible never mentions, like driving a car or even knitting. And the entire incredibly complex system of keeping meat and dairy separate, all of that is spun out from interpreting just one single specific verse.
So this is the crucial point, right? This apparent contradiction between being absolutely committed to the biblical text, but also having the freedom to interpret it, sometimes in ways that seem to totally transform its original meaning. How is that possible?
To really get the answer, we have to go back in time, way back, to a moment of profound crisis in Jewish history, a cataclysm that literally changed everything.
The year is 70 CE. This is when the Roman army marches into Jerusalem and destroys the Second Temple. And we have to be clear, this was not just a building coming down. This was the destruction of the entire center of the Jewish religious universe. For centuries, everything in Judaism had revolved around the temple. It was the place for sacrifices, the hub for major festivals, the home of the priesthood. It was the whole shebang. So without it, the religion faced a genuine existential threat. How could you possibly practice a faith when its very heart had been ripped out? A new way forward was desperately needed, or the tradition was just going to die out.
So, in 70 CE, the temple is gone. Boom. But over the next several hundred years, a new form of Judaism, what we call Rabbinic Judaism, starts to emerge. This new model wasn't centered on a physical place anymore, but on sacred texts. First came the Mishnah, a foundational code of Jewish law. Then came the Talmud, this massive multi-volume library of debate and commentary on those laws. Judaism was basically shifting from a religion of a place to a religion of the book.
And this is what that shift actually looked like on the ground. Instead of one central temple that everyone traveled to, communities started building local synagogues for prayer and for study, and a whole new kind of leadership emerged. The rabbis. Their authority didn't come from their family line, from priestly descent. It came from learning, from their mastery of these sacred texts and the traditions of how to interpret them.
Okay, so the stage is set. The temple's gone, and the text is now front and center. To navigate this new reality, the rabbis developed an incredibly powerful toolkit for engaging with that text. This is how they built a Judaism that could not only survive, but actually thrive.
Now here's the absolute game changer. It's the concept of the oral Torah. The rabbis taught that when God gave Moses the written Torah on Mount Sinai, he also gave him an oral Torah, a whole set of explanations, legal principles, and interpretive rules that were passed down from teacher to student, generation after generation. This idea was nothing short of revolutionary. It meant that the whole process of interpretation wasn't just some clever human invention, it was divinely sanctioned. It was part of the original package deal from Sinai itself.
And this whole world of interpretation basically breaks down into two main categories. First, you have Halakhah. It comes from the Hebrew word for to walk, and it's the law. It's all about practice, what you do, when you do it, how you do it. It's the how-to guide for Jewish life. But then there's Agadah, from the word to tell. This is the lore, the stories, the ethics, the philosophy. If Halakhah is the what, Agadah is the why. You need both to create a complete system of meaning.
Okay, but what's the ultimate goal of all this interpretation, all this debating and analyzing? Well, there's this fantastic little rabbinic parable that tells us everything we need to know.
So the story goes like this. A king gives two servants some raw materials. One gets wheat, the other gets flax. Now, the foolish servant thinks his job is just to guard what he was given, so he does nothing with it. But the wise servant, he understands that the gift is a starting point. He takes the raw materials and creates something new and beautiful. He bakes the wheat into bread and weaves the flax into a tablecloth. So when the king returns, who do you think he praises? Not the guy who just preserved the stuff, but the one who created something with it. The moral of this story is just so profound. The Bible, the revelation from God, is like the wheat and the flax. And according to this view, God doesn't just want us to stick it in a box and preserve it. God wants active, creative engagement. The real goal is to take the raw material of the text and, through interpretation, make it into something that nourishes and beautifies the world. So interpretation isn't a departure from God's will in this worldview, it is God's will.
So you see, this ancient way of thinking, this interpretive model, isn't just some dusty historical curiosity. It is the very engine that has powered Jewish tradition for centuries, right up to this very day.
The great 20th century philosopher Abraham Joshua Heschel just captured it perfectly with this quote: "Judaism is based on a minimum of revelation and a maximum of interpretation." The written text is the starting point. Sure, it's the foundation. But the real life of the tradition happens in the dynamic, challenging, and frankly endless process of interpretation that comes after.
This is the secret sauce, really. It's what allows Judaism to do two things that seem completely contradictory at the same time. Maintain a deep, authentic connection to its ancient past, while also having the flexibility to adapt and respond to the challenges of the present. It's the key to both continuity and change. And so we end right where we started, but hopefully with a totally new perspective. The tradition we've just explored suggests that true faithfulness isn't just about preserving the past like a museum piece. It's about actively wrestling with it to build the future. And that leaves us with one final question to think about. What is the truest way to be faithful to any ancient tradition? Is it to leave it untouched, or is it to join the conversation and help it grow?